Big changes to the MacBook are coming. The last big redesign we got for the MacBook Pro line was in 2016, but we really got that teaser of the future of MacBooks originally with the 2015 MacBook. That was the first time a lot of people were hearing about USB-C. And I think the next big shift, thanks to some leaks from Ming-Chi Kuo and some of my own personal predictions, is going to be the giant, cumbersome, frustrating switch to ARM CPUs that in the end you're going to be glad we did. Let's begin. So yeah, there's a ton of benefits with Apple switching to ARM CPUs, between power efficiency, getting more performance per dollar, and also Apple's been crushing it with their internal CPU development team with the iPhones and the iPads. It's crazy that you can get something like the A12X out of an $800 iPad. I just love imagining what that team could do if their budget was not, $800 5.9mm tablet, and instead they could design a CPU that was way more power hungry, and also the budget of the device was closer to $3,000 instead of, $800. So knowing what's possible with the lower power consumption, the cheaper devices, and the thinner devices, imagine what Apple could create with something the size of a 16-inch MacBook Pro if they got to design the CPUs themselves. Another great benefit of moving to their own custom CPUs is they don't have to try to schedule their hardware releases alongside when Intel comes out with new CPUs, which is always kind of put the MacBook in this awkward, is it a good time to buy, or should I wait for the next gen one? Because for the past couple of years we've had like MacBook Pro refreshes every 6 months, sometimes less, just because Apple's trying to keep up with the different GPUs and CPUs coming out by third parties, and Intel is sort of stagnating in the CPU development as well. So a lot of people just want them to go straight to AMD, but I think they're not, because Apple wants to move to their own architecture. That way they can more consistently drop new MacBook Pros and they don't have to do it every 6 months. And the launches of new MacBook Pros would likely be very similar to that of new iPhones and iPads. Once every 12 months, they can swap out the old CPU with a new one, of course designed in-house. But I'm sure while I'm listing all these positives, you're already down in the comments describing all the negatives. Thank you, pessimistic internet. If Apple listened to you guys, we'd still be rocking CD drives right now, and I'm not joking about that. Whenever I bring up any old legacy standard or old universal port that everyone used to have and now we're getting angry that Apple's moving away from it, you're always angry for a few years, and then about 5 years into the transition, you've pretty much forgotten the transition ever took place, and you're now benefiting from that transition that major tech companies got people to move along with. Yes, it's annoying. Yes, it's frustrating, but a huge downside that a lot of people are going to bring up whenever Apple starts introducing their ARM Mac is losing a ton of software support, because this requires a completely different architecture of coding. The one that all Macs are using right now with their Intel CPUs is called x86, and those types of apps and programs are not easily transferable to an ARM architecture, which is why there's a lot of apps that work fluently on the Mac but not so much on the iPad, and they have to be redesigned very heavily, and also vice versa. Project Catalyst is trying to help developers with that so they can kind of transfer over iPad apps to the Mac, but of course lots and lots of third-party apps that we're all accustomed to using are probably going to take their sweet time on this transition. Apple's not the only company doing this though, so don't act like this is just an Apple thing so that they can make their Macs more like iPads and the rest of the industry thinks this is a horrible idea. No, there are lots of other companies switching to ARM, one of which that beat Apple to the punch was Microsoft with the Surface Pro X. They're already running a version of Windows 10 that supports the ARM architecture, and it can run old x86 apps, but it requires an emulation, which Microsoft claims doesn't come at much hurt of the performance, but with any emulator, you're probably not going to get as great as performance as if you were actually just running it without an emulation. And because Apple has never brought this up on stage, but it's kind of been an open rumor for years now, I remember reading reports that Apple wanted to switch to their own custom CPUs way back in 2017, and even those reports were referencing 2020. So the reason I bring this up, and the reason I cite Kuo saying that 2020 is going to be the first year we get an ARM Mac, which will more than likely be running some modified version of macOS, I bring this up because they've been pretty consistent with the leaks. Ever since I've heard this report, they've all been saying they want to make this switch in 2020, and if you've been listening to my podcasts or watching my Twitch streams for a long time, you know that I've always said new MacBooks, especially big changes to ones, almost never come out in the beginning of the year. So when these leakers are saying 2020, that more than likely means the end of the year, near October probably, and now that's what we're hearing from Kuo, is that yes, they're still on track, that they're on track to deliver the first ARM MacBook at the end of this year. Now the important thing to note here is he does not specify if it's a MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air, so that's the big thing I want you guys to get precise about. This transition of architecture does not happen overnight. This is a very very, very slow transition they're going to take years to get the rest of the Mac lineup on board with, and they're probably going to have a few years of hybrid computers that kind of run both. So again, we don't know for sure if Apple's going to be trying to do some type of x86 apps emulation on their Macs. That would definitely help with adoption if they were willing to do it, but of course, if you provide that option for emulation, it kind of puts the third parties at ease, and they say, well, cool, we don't have to optimize our app for ARM architecture. We can just let the new Mac run its emulators and we'll just keep doing what we're doing. But Apple's kind of known for being the company that doesn't like letting those third parties rest and letting those third parties, you know, you can adopt Bluetooth, you can adopt USB-C, just whenever you feel like it. We'll slap an old USB port on there just so that you can use your old ports when you're ready. No, that's not Apple. Apple's the company that says, future, here, get over it, and if you don't like it, don't buy the new product. That's how they handled the headphone jack, that's how they handled the MacBooks, that's how they handled, you know, the CD drive, and you know, they may sell $100 accessories so you can still technically play CDs or DVDs, but you know, not that many people are gonna buy it, and third parties know very quickly, shoot, we better move on. So that's what makes me think Apple might not support emulation at first. Maybe if there's not enough adoption, they will bring that out via software update later, but point being, I think the ARM MacBook is going to be return of just the standard MacBook line. It's not going to be an Air or a Pro. Some people like the simplicity of the lineup right now, but we had that 12-inch MacBook for years, and ARM would make a total amount of sense on a design like that. Super thin, super light, but it all came at the cost of performance. The 12-inch MacBook, from a design standpoint, was insanely cool. It didn't have fans in it. They had to redesign batteries in a lot of ways to get them to fit inside a laptop that thin and light. They went all in on USB-C, which was very new at the time they unveiled it, but of course, no one really liked it that much because when you don't have fans to cool down our hotter, dated, designed CPUs, then yeah, you can't really get much performance out of it. So it's a very expensive laptop that can't really work that hard. So that's where ARM can showcase itself best, and it also makes sense given the people who probably would buy something like a 12-inch MacBook are more than likely doing light forms of work. They're not necessarily needing super powerful GPUs or CPUs. They're just using it for, you know, basic laptop stuff. So by transitioning people who are buying that laptop into a heavily modified version of macOS that only supports ARM architecture apps, that's probably a soft way to start the transition. It's going to start with this smaller end laptop, but I think when they unveil it, Apple's going to let developers know, hey, this is where we're moving. You better start adopting pretty quick. And yes, this is going to affect things like Boot Camp, and at first it might be hard to get people like Adobe to get on board with it, but my point is, with Microsoft showcasing that they're willing to start making their way towards this switch, as well as Apple, which has been reportedly working on this for years, third parties are going to have to catch up, and the transition process is going to be awkward, it's going to be weird. A lot of you are probably going to get annoyed that you can't play Minecraft on it. I know, right? If you're spending $1,000 on a machine to play Minecraft, it probably shouldn't be a Mac, which is weird because Steve Jobs, when he founded Apple, literally said, I want to make a $2,000 Minecraft machine, and this is disregarding that. It's very frustrating, I get it, but in time, like I brought up at the beginning of this video, the transition will take a few years. It'll be a long time before Apple converts their entire lineup of Macs over to ARM, probably the Mac Pro being the last one. They're going to start out with this smaller, low-end MacBook, but it's got something like an A13X chip in it, and it's going to be really, really powerful and really, really fast. It's just going to be limited by software, and then as more developers start switching over, that's when they bring ARM to the MacBook Air, and eventually the MacBook Pro a couple years down the road. Eventually start bringing it to the desktop lineup, and this is how you're going to be able to maximize performance and power consumption. But yes, the software limitations are going to be there for a while. People are going to be annoyed by them because there's more than likely going to be some handy features the ARM MacBooks are going to have, maybe some that Apple's been pocketing for a long time. Like, what if the first ARM MacBook has things like Face ID and it has cellular support? You know, the iPad can do that, maybe because of its power efficiency with the CPUs, so why not bring that to the MacBook as well? If they showcase the first 12-inch ARM MacBook with Face ID and cellular support, a lot of people will be like, hey, when is that coming to the rest of the Macs? So yeah, there will be some frustration along with it. If you need that legacy software support, pretty much just hang on to your old laptops for a while, but like any standard Apple chooses to adopt to, you're gonna hate it at first, and then 5 years from now, you're gonna be utilizing it, you're gonna be reaping all the benefits, and you're not even gonna remember that you hated it before. That's simply how this works, and that's how I see the Mac lineup going. And with Quo saying there's supposed to be a drastic redesign to the MacBook line next year, that's when I'm anticipating they're gonna take what they learn from this super portable, ultra thin, ultra light ARM Mac and bring it to the rest of their lineup. But what do you guys think is gonna happen? Feel free to hit me up over on Twitter, join my Discord, and we can bicker more about the future of the Minecraft machines and how is it gonna get a Slofi button? This is your Apple Sheep here. I'll see you in the next one.